Hi guys, Blackie for Shaman's Forge Woodscraft. Not long ago I did a video about building a dingle stick. Now, as I expressed to those that you may have not seen it, a dingle stick is a term we used back in the day, and what it means is it is a wooden implement that we're going to create at camp for use around camp. And then when we move on, we will probably leave it or dispose of it. It's so easy to create that we don't worry about carrying one because we can make it quickly. Now, the device I made was this dingle stick right here. And I showed all the features of this dingle stick. If you don't remember this, just look back a couple of my videos and you'll find it. Well, this is dingle stick part 2. Okay, you've created a stick for taking your pot on and off the fire, for taking the lid off easily, for stirring the food and tasting the food. Now we want to go to the next step, which is creating something for putting this over the fire, and that is the Pothook dingle stick. Now, several different ways of making this, there are tons of them. And the old Boy Scout manual that I showed not long ago lists like 6 or 8 that each scout was supposed to know how to make, swinging trammels and everything. And so I'm kind of working my way through that if you want to follow along. So first, we've made the dingle stick for getting it on and off the fire. Now we're going to make a dingle stick for hanging it on the fire. And what we've done is, we've simply found a branch. This is a small tree, a branch about the size of my thumb, with a limb coming off. A pretty substantial little V right there. Actually, it was probably more like that when it was grown. I've cut it and I've left this here. And now I've cut a notch in this end, stripped all the bark off of it, and I'm now going to utilize it for hanging my pot. Now, this can be used a couple of different ways. First off, let me give you a better look at it. Okay, one pot hook. How long is it? Oh, about 1 foot. The hook is pretty substantial on that end. This end I flattened off a little bit. The other end I flattened off. And then I've cut this deep hook into it. Now, there's 2 different ways this can be utilized. One, if I have a hanging crossbar that I'm going to be utilizing, then I can hang it from that end. And notice I have deeply, that's one thing I like about this knife, with them curves I can really get in there and carve. I have deeply cut that notch. And what that means is that when you take the pot bail, it will actually sit in there and kind of wedge in place. Now, that ain't going to fall off easily at all. So now I've got one that I can manipulate around, taking the lid off and etc., and I don't worry about my pot falling off in the fire. It can also be used from this end. Now, at present, what I've got it set up for is, if I have a pretty good sized crossbar, I'm going to hang the pot like that onto it, so that the pot can be suspended above the fire at a given depth. I can also hook a cord to this from a tripod and raise or lower it by making the tripod wider or smaller. I can also take it and reverse it. And if I take a stick that's wedged on one end under rocks or whatever, and I cut to this wedge, it will come up and lock into that notch, thus allowing it to hang that way. Now, if I cut this, notice how this is cut where it kind of comes to a point. That allows it to sit just like that. Now, on my wedge stick, coming from the ground, and what this would be a several foot long, maybe 8 foot long pole that I'm going to wedge up under a rock on one end and then prop it to be able to adjust for the altitude to hold the pot over. On this wedge up here on the top, I'm going to cut a slight notch, actually a small little bowl, like I'm starting for a bow drill set. I want it just big enough so the tip of that point easily sits into it. And all you got to do is just like I'm doing here, put the edge of your knife up there, being careful, of course, because if you slip, don't have your finger behind it, Blackie. Make sure that if it slips, it's not going to do it. Notice I'm doing it so it's edge up. So if it slips, it's not stabbing into my hand. Go away, little bug. So now that I have made a pretty good little divot right there in the end, now this point right here wants to sit into it, and therefore it will swing a little bit and not have to worry about coming out of that notch. So now if the wind gets up or whatever, my pot can swing a little bit, and it keeps recentering itself because of the way that's made, it recenters it when it gets done swinging. It won't come out of that divot. So that pot can sit there and swing in the breeze and not fall. Pretty simple, huh? Since I'm going to be using a big crossbar, I want it to be locked in there. And I prefer to reach up on a big fire, a cooking fire, and take my pot off if I'm going to be doing a lot of manipulation on it, rather than trying to do it over the flames and the heat, etc. So therefore, I want this big hook that I can just quickly sit it up there, and it's there. Now when I take it off, I can add the ingredients, whatever, hook my thing, and then immediately hook it back. It's quick on and off the fire for me to manipulate. That's my favorite way to do it. With just a few minutes manipulation, I have made a very useful bit of field kit, a dingle stick. It has done several things. One, it's provided me something I can use for cooking on the fire and for having around camp. Two, I practiced my wood skills. I practiced my carving skills. I'm learning all those notches, like the Morse code, Chanskys, tri-stick. Each one of those notches is important, and you should know at least most of them, especially in whatever applies in your woods. I have found coming up as a young man running around the woods of Alabama, Georgia, and North Florida, that being able to make something meant I didn't have to tote it. And this stuff is everywhere. The scrub that's everywhere down here is easily trimmed, and you ain't got to worry about it because it'll grow back in a matter of weeks, it seems like. So you could easily harvest this stuff to make into dingle sticks for around the fire. Now this wood stick, this dingle stick that I first showed you, I'm carrying it with my kit. I usually would not do that, to be honest. But since I've created it, I want you to get an opportunity to see how it interacts. In my recent cooking video, I was utilizing it then. Now I've made up the Pothook. Next, I'm going to be making up a set of fire irons. And I will eventually have the whole camp made up for you. And this fall, when I go to my hunting camp I'm going to set up, I will set it all up in one place and do some videos where you get to see how all of it interacts. We've still got the pot tree to make. We've still got the crossbars, the tripod, the drying rack. There's also the baking area. Lots of little things yet to do where I can show you how to do it. Where all you do is you carry a knife in the field and you make everything else there you need. Stay tuned, we'll get to it, guys. I'm Blackie for Shaman's Forge Woodscraft. Wishing you safe journeys. Have a great day, guys.